Fallout from the DNC autopsy report continues. A deal in Iran. Do we have one? Florida Congressman Randy Fine drops by to let us know if the SAVE Act is salvageable and if he can expel Ilhan Omar from Congress. There might be a lot of dual citizens in Congress. We're going to find out. Welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. Let's get into it. All right, guys. I was almost going to say happy Monday, but anyway, it is Tuesday. I hope you had a long and enjoyable 3-day weekend. I hope you had time to reflect on the sacrifice of so many Americans who have given us this freedom. I'll tell you two things from over the weekend that I want to call out. They do this, PBS does this thing every holiday weekend, every Memorial Day weekend with Gary Sinise. I love watching this thing. I used to go in person. I like watching it. This year, Gary Sinise recalled the fact that this will be the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And I got to tell you, it was moving. The sacrifice, they acknowledged this one lieutenant colonel, I believe, from the Pentagon who ran in and saved lives and the number of people who died. It really got me. And I think as we celebrate our 250th anniversary in July, and then the 25th anniversary of 9/11. It's a reminder of the sacrifice so many Americans have made throughout our history, throughout recent history, and then the president speaking at Arlington yesterday, and the vice president, by the way. It was unbelievable. And I think sometimes each of these holidays, Christmas and Easter even, like, we lose the essence of them sometimes because of the commercialization of holidays. And I love when we can get back to the true meaning of them. And I mentioned this on Friday, but too often I think on Memorial Day, we say, thank you for your service. That's Veterans Day or Armed Forces Day. And the true essence of Memorial Day is to thank and remember the sacrifice, the true sacrifice of why we have Memorial Day. Because for a lot of people, it's not a happy day. It's not a day to celebrate. It's a sad day. It's a somber day. And we are a great country. We are a blessed country. And allowing us to remember why, especially for younger Americans, is important. And I was just, so anyway, I say all that because I thought it was a great weekend of events that really brought back the essence of this. Speaking of that, we had a lot of anti-Trump on Sunday. I tell you guys all the time, I love watching the Sunday shows because it gives me a reason to come on and bash them all. But it was amazing. I was watching, look at Meet the Press. You know, their number one guest was Tom Massey. Did anyone care? And then the round table was filled with a bunch of people who don't like Trump. And then you looked at this week, Harry Dunn, a former Capitol Hill police officer, and then a panel of anti-Trump people on ABC's This Week. Face the Nation, the same thing. Chris Van Hollen, lead guest, and then a panel of people that, don't like Trump. It's a reminder that these shows aren't trying to be balanced. And later in the week, I want to get into this whole Stephen Colbert thing. I'll talk to you about that later as we go on. But there was a big update in Iran, and I will tell you this. I talked to a very senior administration official, and the framework for a deal is at hand. And you may have heard some of these people disparage some of this over the weekend. And initially, I was a little skeptical when I spoke to this person. But it's not, don't believe everything that you hear from some of the haters is all I'll tell you. I think we're getting close. The administration is very wide open. The phrase that they kept using over and over again is no dust, no dollars. What do I mean by that? They're very aware. The uranium is still king. These guys cannot possess the means or the desire to enrich uranium in pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Full stop. The administration will not do anything less. And if they don't do anything that doesn't or undermines that, then the administration's clear. Then we're back. We're going to cut you off. There's no pallet of cash coming your way under the JCPOA that Obama said. But I feel really good about where things are. And I just wanted you to know that there is, it's going to take a while is the other big thing. These texts don't get shifted back like it's some kind of Google Doc that we can look at from both sides. The Iranian side is very slow. It's an iterative process, and even the simplest detail takes a lot of time from what I was told. So this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take a little bit of time. But as you saw last night, some skirmishes are going to prevail. Hopefully they are limited. But I do believe that the U.S. has got Iran in a position that finally acknowledges that there is no future in which they possess or pursue a nuclear weapon. They're very, very clear about that. And they think that the moderates in the country have started to have a bigger voice because we've killed, frankly, a lot of the other regime. So anyway, a lot to break down on that, and the Dem autopsy getting a lot more. But before I bring in Congressman Randy Fine, rather, I have a Father's Day special that I'm going to do for everyone right now for 7 days only, because I'm not going to do this, but for only 7 days, because I want to make sure I can deliver them for Father's Day. If you are interested in an actual signed copy of Trump 2.0 or the briefing, listen up. Here's the deal. All you have to do is go to SeanSpicer.com, head to the books tab. Okay. There's a little tab up there at SeanSpicer.com, and you can make your purchase of either Trump 2.0 or the briefing. Trump 2.0, $30, the briefing, $25. That includes postage. I send it your way, all signed. And then you just go to contact@SeanSpicer.com and say, hey, I just purchased a copy. Here's what I wanted to send to my dad. Happy Father's Day. Don't get too verbose, but I'll be glad to do these 7 days only, because I cannot do it for any longer. I want to make sure that they definitely arrive in time for Father's Day. So go to SeanSpicer.com, go to the books tab, order those 2 books. Anyway, that's the deal for you. Without further delay, I want to bring in Congressman Randy Fine of Florida. Congressman, good to see you again. I know we're getting early reports about a deal with Iran, memorandum of understanding. Without sort of presupposing that it's final, what do you think about the details that are coming out so far?
Well, I think the details depend on who you hear them from. What I think is clear is what a deal needs to have and what I think President Trump will require. And I really think it requires 3 things in order to be America first, and only 3 things. The first is no nuclear weapon. That means they have to give up both the desire to create one, as well as all the capabilities they've already created, all of the enriched uranium. Number 2 is they have to end their efforts to build a missile that could hit the United States. So they have plenty of missiles that can hit Israel. They have plenty of missiles that can hit Europe, but they don't have a missile that could hit the United States. And we don't want them to have one. There's no need for them to have one. And then the third and final thing is an open and free Strait of Hormuz, so world commerce can happen easily, gas prices go back down. If we get those 3 things, we will have looked out for the interests of America, and I'm confident the president is not going to allow a deal to take place which won't deliver on those 3 things.
As far as their desire goes, Iran, that is, do you think you can trust them?
No. And that's why we can't do a deal where we give them a hamburger today to get paid next Wednesday, to use an old Popeye analogy. No, the terms have to be simultaneous. You do something for us now, we do something for you now. You do something for us 30 days from now, we do something for you 30 days from now. But there can be no deal that involves trust, because the folks over there, the Muslim religious leaders that run that country, have proven that they are unworthy of that trust. So no, there can't be a deal based on faith. There can only be a deal based on simultaneous exchange of value.
I want to move on, because the last time you and I spoke was up at the Republican Study Committee gathering. Yep. And you expressed a concern about Somali pirates. Can you explain, has that gotten worse, better, the same?
Well, what I was talking about from Somali pirates were not actually pirates in Somalia, but I was talking about Somalians in the United States that are ripping off our country. And we have seen it in no place greater than Minnesota, though there are reports of Somali ripoffs taking place in Maine and taking place in Ohio and other places as well. The issue is we have allowed foreigners to come into this country, and instead of being appreciative of American generosity, they have ripped us off and robbed our system. They have brought the values that ruined their country into our own. And so we have made progress on that. There are investigations going on, both in Congress and led by the vice president. And there have been started to be arrests being made by the Trump Justice Department. So we have made progress. We're also having discussions about policy changes that would end these. So, for example, I have a bill that would forbid any non-American from getting any form of welfare. So we talk about, for example, well, we focus on illegal immigrants, and we should, but legal immigrants, people who come to this country because they want to leave wherever they're from, they should not get free stuff. If they want to come for freedom and opportunity, that's one thing. But if they want to come to suck off the dole, that's not okay. And to end that. And then the other thing we're focused on is just really ramping up requirements and paperwork to make sure these can't get ripped off. But there is clearly an epidemic, particularly in blue states, where it is a form of fundraising for politicians like Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar, where they allow these people to rip us off. And then in return, those people take a percentage of what they've stolen and funnel it back into their campaigns. It is a big problem, and we are dealing with it.
Yeah, I want to get to Ilhan Omar in a second because you've had some choice words about her. Do you think that the vice president had this meeting today on fraud? I guess what blows my mind to some degree is why these things take so long. Like we've had Doge, Nick Shirley exposed what was going on in Minnesota. The vice president launched this task force in Ohio. I talked to your colleague, Brandon Gill, the other day about what's going on in Congress. But like, to me, if we've seen it in home health care, we've seen it in the Leering centers. It seems like this is a pattern that there should be more attention put on throughout all of these government programs in every state.
Well, we're fighting three problems and dealing with it. One is a magic word of compassion. So you're told that these programs are compassionate, that they help people. And when you attack these programs, you're being mean. And there's this overwhelming desire to engage in compassion. No one's compassionate for the American people. No one's compassionate for our kids and grandkids who this money is being stolen from. But there's this compassion that makes people reluctant to deal with it. The second thing is the deep state is real. One of the most profound things I was told when I got to Washington a year ago was that 95% of people in D.C. voted for Kamala Harris. So who do you think is working in all of these government agencies? We may have Republicans in charge at the top, but that doesn't mean that it goes all the way down. And then the third thing is people often are unwilling to deal with the truth the way it is. There's a phrase, ignorance is bliss, and it is true. People often want to live in the world the way they wish it was, not the way it actually is. And dealing with these programs, which sound good and make you feel good and thinking I'm helping people, but realizing all they are giant ripoff schemes, is difficult for people to deal with. So these three things, I think, slow us down. The good news is we are working on it. And I do think we're going to stop it.
So in your mind, what does success look like? And what I mean by that is it just greater awareness of the fraud, prosecutions, money recovered, reform to the programs, all of the above? Like in your mind, you've got Brandon Gill doing this oversight thing, the vice president leading this task force. But what does success look like?
Well, success is holding everyone who did this accountable, putting people in jail. I think success is also making sure it can never happen again. And that's why I think eliminating foreign eligibility for welfare programs is so important. That's where it comes from. And then the third part of this is immigration. We have clearly have a massive problem in our immigration program. The Somali fraud is not coming from natural born citizens. This is from people who we have failed. We have allowed people, it was a choice to allow people into our country that did not come to make it better, but came to loot and rob it. And so we have got to shut down our legal immigration system and rebuild it into one that says, if you are allowed to come to the United States, it is because it is good for the United States. We don't care whether it's good for you. You're a foreigner. Whether it's good for the United States is the only consideration that should matter. When we do those three things, we will know that we've won.
You kind of mentioned some of the Democrats on the other side, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris voters or whatever. Do you believe that these people are complicit in this?
I think there's no question. The level of fraud that we've seen when you see programs for autism increasing thousands of percentages, the rate of growth is such that it would be impossible to not know what was going on. It required willful disbelief. And so they absolutely knew what's going on. And the evidence shows that they did, that at times the Somalis got cut off and they went to the politicians and they said, we need the gravy train to start running. And the politicians got it moving again. We see in Ilhan Omar helping friends and relatives get access to money. We see Ilhan Omar running the bills that allowed much of this fraud to happen. And by the way, we see it because this exact sort of thing happened in their home countries. That's what ruined them. So yes, there's absolute certainty. Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison, they absolutely knew what was going on and they personally benefited from it.
I mean, I got to imagine that that's part of the reason why this is difficult, is because these guys are aware of it. They know about it. They need it to continue. When you talk about this, are they willing to admit that they're opposed to it, or do they? Because it seems to me as though the Republicans are leading this effort, but I don't see a lot of Democrats willing to jump on board.
Well, no, because they need it. Look, the Democratic Party can't win elections based on the American people anymore. The American people have rejected the Democratic Party. The only way they can win is to cheat, and they cheat in multiple ways, one of which is having foreigners vote in our elections, but another way is how they raise the money to operate in our elections. So you're the Leering Center. Let's just use them as an example. You're the Leering Center, and I'm making up these numbers, but it's instructive. You get $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million to leer, I guess, for your students to leer English or whatever it is that they're doing. You're not actually doing anything. The politicians know it. And so you're cutting them $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 checks to their campaigns in order to allow them to run for reelection. That's the scam that's going on. It's basically a kickback of these illegal proceeds to these politicians. They don't want it to stop. So they rely on compassion. Wait, you're cutting programs that needy people need. Well, no, we're cutting from foreigners and scam artists. And so they rely on these things of compassion. They rely on their deep state employees to slow things down. And they rely on the American people simply not willing to accept that we're not all the same, that we don't share the same values, that there are people who've come to this country to hurt it, not to help it.
You know, the thing that's so funny, you mentioned the autism funding, and it's crazy. I saw a statistic the other day about all of the states and the amount of funding that's ramped up over the last few years. You talk about what happened during COVID. We talk about these learning/leering centers in Minnesota, home health care. It's like program after program after program is wrought with millions, if not billions of dollars of fraud. And it would seem to me that if I were someone like you and was going around to my constituents in Florida and I'd say, hey, I'm trying to stop all of the money that's being wasted that you're having to fund, right? Like you're working harder, you're sending your money in the form of taxes to Washington, and then we're blowing it away. We're just literally like, when you talk about that, where does that rank as an issue? Because it seems to me that many politicians still think it makes more sense to bring something home than to brag about how much money you've saved.
Look, in my district, talking about welfare fraud and immigration, this is really an immigration issue at the end of the day. It's the number one issue that people want to talk about. Immigration of people to America who don't share American values. It's something that scares people. I see fear in the eyes of my constituents. They don't want what happened in Minnesota to happen in Florida. So no, I mean, when I'm doing teletown halls, and I did one just last week, I had over 10,000 of my constituents come on. No one asked me how much money I brought home for the district, but I did get asked about fraud. I did get asked about the Islamification of America. I did get asked about immigration. Those are the questions that my constituents had for me. I mean, I think maybe some Republicans who are in kind of swing districts who need Democrats to win, they have to appeal to these fake compassion views and these other things to do it. But where I represent in Florida, people are angry because they know it's not their tax money that is paying for this fraud. We aren't using tax money to pay for the fraud because we don't have enough money. We are borrowing that money from our grandchildren to pay for the fraud. I mean, it'd be one thing if I was paying extra to pay for it. At least I'm being stupid with my own money. We're being stupid with our grandchildren's money. And that makes my voters very, very angry.
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. We're being bad with China's money because they're financing our debt. So we're spending money we don't have that they're lending us to then be used for fraud. When you say, though, the Islamification of America, no amnesty for anyone, walk us through what that means to you. And because that's not a phrase you hear that often.
Well, there's a growing effort after 9/11, after 19 Muslim terrorists flew airplanes into buildings in New York and killed 3,000 Americans. Someone thought it was a good idea to throw the door open and say, come on in. And so over the last 20 years, we've allowed millions of people into this country, many of whom practice a religion fundamentally different than Christianity or Judaism. So Christians and Jews believe in practicing our faiths and we're passionate about them, but we also believe other people can practice their own faiths. But we've allowed a religion into this country that many people believe in order for them to practice their religion, you have to submit to their religion. They can only practice their religion if you are willing to go along with it as well. And so it is things that we have seen with, for example, Muslim advocates in New York saying that non-Muslims have to give up their dogs because it is not okay in Islam. You must submit to their religion. We've seen it in Michigan where where Christians are being told they're no longer welcome in Muslim majority cities. It's where we see the Muslim call to prayer, which is a call for submission early in the morning. And it is a real issue. Look, I'm Jewish. I don't eat pork, but I don't expect the grocery store down the street not to sell it. In order for me to practice my own religion, you don't have to change how you live your own life. And that is the fundamental difference. And we are seeing it in places around the country where people are expected to change how they live in order to accommodate others. A great example was just shown in Texas, where they can't have the Bible in a school, but they can have the Quran in school because they must have the Quran in school in order to practice their own religion. That's not how this works. And I think that's what people worry about. Radical Muslims, and I call them radical because they're the minority, radical Muslims who want to live in peace and harmony with the rest of us say, hey, I'm just like you. I want to practice my faith in private. This is what I believe. Let me believe it. You believe what you want to believe. That's great. That's America. But we have a real issue in mainstream Islam in the United States where they want to tell us how we have to live in order for them to live how they want to live. And I'm not willing to go along with that.
How much pushback do you get from your colleagues that sort of fear that they're taking on a First Amendment freedom of religion issue on that?
It is not a lot on the Republican side. Actually, the fastest growing caucus in the House is the anti-Sharia caucus, where we're now over 70 members, and it was just created a few weeks ago. The number one issue that I get asked about in my town halls and my constituent events that is not being talked about nationally all the time is this concern that people have. They see it in their schools. They see it when they hear when the school cafeterias are told, no, you've got to make sure all students eat halal because some students want to be halal. Regular people are worried about this. And I think people don't understand the difference between a faith that says, I want to practice my religion in peace, and a faith that says, you have to practice my religion for me to practice my religion. And look,
how often does this come up? Like in Florida schools, is this a problem?
No, because we're dealing with it, but we've passed legislation this year to deal with it. We have mosques that are popping up, and you can find the clips. I'll give you a great example. I talked about it in Congress last week. You know, there's a guy who runs a school in South Florida that has gotten tax dollars. It's being cut off. That said Jews are the brothers of apes and pigs, and the infidel must die by the sword of Allah. That's not like my religion or yours. That's fundamentally different. It absolutely comes up. And as we've had these large Muslim enclaves tried to be developed, thousands of Floridians will show up and say, we do not want this here. This is happening under the radar in many places, but we absolutely hear it about from our constituents. Like I said, it's the number one thing people ask me about that's not being talked about nationally all the time. People are very, very worried about it.
You know, I know you represent Florida, but there's this primary tonight in Texas. I think it's the 35th district. There's this woman that says that ICE camps, ICE detention centers to be used for Jews. The Democrats are being a little, they're a little concerned she might pull out the primary and then they'd have to own her. How concerned are you that she might actually be one of your colleagues next year?
Well, I am concerned. Look, anti-Semitism is mainstream on the Democratic side. That much is clear. That woman who now all of Democrat leaders want to condemn, she came in first in her primary. That's who Democratic voters wanted. Now she has a runoff and we'll see how it goes. But look how they have all run to support a Senate candidate in Maine who literally has a Nazi tattoo on his chest, or a Senate candidate in Michigan who clearly supports Muslim terror in the form of Hamas and Hezbollah. Anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and frankly, anti-Western civilization, that is mainstream Democratic view. And if I've felt terrible about anything in the year that I've served in Congress, what I realize is this isn't the Democratic Party of 30 years ago, where Democrats and Republicans might have had different ways to get to the end result, but both parties loved America. They just had slightly different visions of how we would get there. Many of the people that I serve with hate this country. They do not think America is a noble enterprise. They don't think it's the greatest country in the history of the world. They seek its destruction. And I just talked on social media about another candidate, a Democrat running for Congress in California who sits on the Sacramento City Council, who refuses to say the Pledge of Allegiance at her city meetings. She turns her back to the flag, and her justification was, I use that time to think about all of the things that make America terrible. That is not fringe in the Democratic Party anymore. It's what makes where we are as a country very dangerous right now.
I'm glad you raised that. Do you know how nuts it is that doesn't get, like, it takes Randy Fine coming on Sean Spicer's show to get attention? I mean, the idea that a woman that's elected already in Sacramento, that's running for Congress, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's worse. Sean, it's worse. She is the daughter of refugees. This gets back to our earlier discussion about immigration. So her parents are from Laos. They apparently had to flee for their lives. And America said, you can come here and be part of our country. So she's born in America. She's a natural born citizen who was saved from theoretically death where she came from. And her thanks to this country that saved her family is to turn her back when the Pledge of Allegiance is stated and to think about how terrible it is. The Democratic Party is broken.
But the worst part is she got elected in the first place with that view and now wants to seek a higher office to represent people in the United States Congress. I mean, I do worry about the voters too, right? I mean, part of my thing is like, what's going on in this country that you go, yeah, that's who I want as my representative.
You should be worried because, look, you and I have just in the last 2 minutes talked about someone in Texas who wants to build concentration camps for American Jews, someone in California who won't pledge allegiance to the flag, someone in Maine who has a Nazi tattoo on their chest, and someone in Michigan who says Muslim terrorists are good. That's 4 states, 4 Democratic candidates, all who have a chance to win. That is not an outlier. That is a problem. The Democratic Party is broken. There are some rational voices in it. A Bill Maher, a Jared Moskowitz, a Josh Gottheimer, but they are the minority now, not the majority. And that's something we should all be afraid of when one of our 2 major parties hates the country that they say they want to serve. We have a real problem.
I think you just gave me a great column idea. I mean, think about it. That's some serious, it's not fringy anymore. That's where they are. And then, but I know you've also talked about, you mentioned her earlier, expelling Omar for Congress? Make the case.
Well, I think you can do multiple reasons. Omar has multiple things she's done wrong. So number one, she lied in her financial disclosure. So as a member of Congress, you have to fill out a form that says how much money you have. There's rules, it's ranges. People don't actually know what you're worth because you don't have to say exactly what it is, but you give a range of your worth. I've had to do one of these now for 10 years as a member of the legislature and now as a member of Congress. Ilhan Omar filled one out a couple of years ago and said basically she didn't have any money. She was broke. She was worth a few $1,000s. And then she fills one out that says she's worth $30 million. So she goes from no money to $30 million. And then she turns around after she gets a lot of heat for that and says, oh, I made an accounting error. I really don't have $30 million. I'm broke. Well, you don't make a $30 million accounting error. An accounting error is when you think you have $100 in your checking account and you really only had 90. I mean, it's not you thought you were broke and you had 30 million. So she lied in one of these two things. She needs to be held accountable for that. Second, she needs to be held accountable. It appears very likely she engaged in immigration fraud, whether it's her own immigration fraud when she became a refugee. There's now some reporting that she was not a child when she was considered a refugee, so she may have been ineligible. There's also reporting that she married her brother to help him get into this country. And then the third issue is her involvement in all of this immigration fraud. She passed the bill that created this meals immigration fraud. She has tried to get money for her family members. She has tried to get money for her friends, and she has tried to cover it up, and she's refused to work with the Minnesota legislature that's trying to look into the fraud in their state. For all of these reasons, I not only don't think she should be a member of Congress, I don't think she should be an American. And I think many of these people who've engaged in this need to be sent home. I think the woman from California needs to be sent back to Laos. I think Ilhan Omar needs to be sent back to Somalia. And I think we also need to say that no one can serve in Congress who's a citizen of a foreign country. We have dozens of members of Congress who may be citizens of other countries in addition to citizens of America. That is a real problem. When you are, I mean, we have a member of Congress who said, I'm a Guatemalan before I'm an American. That should not be allowed. We've got to stop it.
100%. I don't even think that, like, I think this would come as a shock to a lot of people. The idea that you have dual citizenship, I didn't even know that, like, honestly, like, but part of it, and you touched on this, because I think the way you phrased this was careful, but intentional. Correct me if I'm wrong. Part of the reason is some of these people won't admit it.
That they're dual citizens? Oh,
right.
No, that you don't know. What we know is there's more than 30 members of Congress who are not natural born citizens of the United States. But now
wait. Just do the math for a second. That's just shy of a tenth of a member of, like, so maybe like 8% that are dual.
And by the way, look, some of them are great members. Juan Ciscomani, for example, talks about how he's the embodiment of the American dream. But if you think Jayapal is a great advocate for the United States, or Ilhan Omar is a great advocate for the United States, or Delia Ramirez, who said, I'm a Guatemalan first, I'm an American second. If you think that the guy who, I can't even remember his name, who you can barely understand, who abused his dogs before he got to Congress. If you think some of these people share American values, you're out of your mind. So I filed a bill that's very simple. It says you can't be a dual citizen and serve in Congress. You can only be a citizen of the
any
United
Dems
States.
sign up for that?
Sorry?
You have any Democratic co-sponsors of that?
Of course not, because they would prefer that non-Americans serve in Congress. They would prefer foreigners serve in Congress than Americans because it fits their mission of destroying the country. Remember, the lady who turns her back proudly during the Pledge of Allegiance so she can think about how terrible America is. And why would she even want to serve in Congress? Why would someone who hates America want to serve in Congress? They want to serve in Congress because their goal is to destroy America.
I know this is sort of a weird segue, but it does tie into this. The whole idea of the Save America Act is to make sure that when you vote, you are an American citizen, right? Leader Thune has been saying that he doesn't have the votes for this. Just in your mind, I think that this is a big deal for the base for obvious reasons.
It is.
What's the next step, though? I mean, they're sort of like, well, we don't have the votes. We got to go on a vacation. What do we do to move this forward, or do we just have to wait?
Well, I'll tell you what I've done. I've announced that I will not vote for any Senate bills until they pass the Save America Act. And I've done that. And so have about 10 of my colleagues. There will come a point where they need Republican House votes to pass a Senate bill because the Democrats won't vote for it. And that bill will fail because I'm not they've got time for dealing with shark attacks and boat parades and art sales and all kinds of other stuff. But they don't have time to deal with the most important thing of all, to make sure that only Americans vote in American elections. Something, by the way, that overwhelming majority of Americans support: Republican, Democrat, independent, white, black, man, woman. No one opposes this. So that's one thing I've done. The second thing is I'm thinking about the idea President Trump called for, which is amending every bill that we send to the Senate to attach the Save America Act to it. The president called for it. I think it's something that's worth considering. But our base gets angry. They say, you have 50 votes. Do your job. Stop taking vacations. Now, I want to give credit to the House. We've passed the Save America Act multiple times. We are not the cause of the dysfunction in Washington. That is the Senate. Whether it's funding border security or whether it's passing the Save America Act, you have 53 out of 100 Republican senators, or so-called Republican senators, yet many of them are unwilling to do the job that we sent them there to do.
Obviously, I think this entire agenda can only move forward if we maintain Republican majorities. You're a former legislator. Florida just passed this new redistricting bill that takes Florida from 20 Republicans and 8 Democrats to 24-4. There's some concern among people that we might have diluted the Republican base in trying to get these additional 4 seats. How confident are you in the efforts that Florida Republicans have done to enshrine these new 4 seats?
So my district didn't change. That's not something I have to deal with. My understanding of the maps, and they didn't use partisan factors when they were doing the redistricting, because you're not allowed to do that in Florida. What they did is they made the districts more geographically compact, and they stopped gerrymandering for Democrats. In fact, it used to be the law in Florida that you were required to gerrymander black Democratic districts. You could never look at Republican data. You could only look at Republican data, and they stopped doing that. So I think what happens is, as common sense prevails, Democrats will lose seats. My understanding is only 2 of my 20 Republican colleagues have any material dilution, and they don't seem super worried about it. And the other 4 seats we have a shot to win. So I can't speak to the other states, but in Florida, there's a great deal of optimism as we've stopped gerrymandering for Democrats, and we allow Florida voters to vote, that we will pick up those 4 seats.
I know there's a district south of you, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, running in a district that the black Democrats believe that they own.
Yeah.
Is this going to be an interesting little food fight to watch on the left?
It is, and it shows this culture that we developed. Literally, Florida state law said Republicans don't have the right to districts. White or black, white Democrats don't have the right to districts, but black Democrats by law had to be gerrymandered to be given districts. It's about as racist as you think. So one of these districts apparently has a plurality, not a majority, of black Americans in it. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz has chosen to run there. I believe that district in a general election has a lot of Democrats in it. It's part of Broward County, which is the bluest part of our state. But what you see is black Democrats saying, no, 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 we are entitled to this. Entitled. The interests of non-black voters should not be considered. If you're a Hispanic Democrat, you shouldn't be able to vote. If you're a white Democrat, you should not be able to vote. We are entitled to this. And it's frankly pretty disgusting. I mean, I would say I'm here for the fight, but look, I don't like where the Democratic Party has ended up. And I think this kind of virulent, look, it is the party of the Ku Klux Klan. We have to remember that. So racism is the foundation of the Democratic Party. But seeing a race war inside the Democratic Party, while the Republican in me likes it, the American in me finds it very sad.
The last thing I want to ask you, the president had some big wins on Trump RX the other day. He kept talking about more and more prices getting brought down. Um, in your area, Florida, obviously a lot of seniors. Is that something that is known? What I mean is, obviously, I love the policy. I guess the question is, as you go around and talk to your constituents, do they see the benefits of Trump RX, or do we have more that we need to do to sell it?
I think it's a little bit of both. They see the benefits, but we have more to do to sell it. And the reason for that is this: anything good that Trump does, the media never talks about. But anytime there's a problem, they obsess about it. So when egg prices go down 97%, you never hear about that. But when gas prices go up $1, the media loses their mind, even when gas prices are lower than they were under Biden. So we have to make sure people understand that the good things that they see out there are because of the president. And I tell people, 11%, there are 11% larger tax refunds this year. I do represent a very senior district, and the vast majority of them have noticed that they didn't have to pay taxes on their Social Security benefits. I talk about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. So we continue to do that. I'm very optimistic about the November election. When the conflict with Iran winds down and gas prices come down, that's really the only thing out there that is a headwind to us. Everything else is good. And I think, and the other part of it is the Democrats are nominating crazy people. I think in the end, as they nominate lunatics, I think non-crazy Democrats and independents are going to say, I'm not voting for someone who won't say the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not voting for someone who wants to build concentration camps and put American Jews in them. I'm not voting for someone who has a Nazi tattoo on his chest. I'm not voting for someone who's an open Muslim terrorist. I'm just not going to do that. And so I think all of these things combined make me optimistic for where we're going to end up in November.
All right. Congressman Randy Fine, I appreciate you sharing your insight with us and all this. Look forward to having you back soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks for what you do.
You bet. All right, man. He is on fire. What a great guy. So I didn't even know the full extent of all those members of Congress that had dual citizenship. That is crazy. By the way, tomorrow, pollster Jim McLaughlin, we got a lot to break down with him. And then Thursday, a great panel coming your way. Tudor Dixon, my old buddy Chris Salcedo is going to join us, and Brooke Goldstein. So we've got that happening. We'll continue to break down the DNC autopsy because, man, was this a huge mistake. These guys have blown it since the jump, and now there are serious calls for Ken Martin, the DNC chairman, to step down. We'll break that all down for you later in the week. So much to get to. Again, if you're interested in this Father's Day book sale, go to SeanSpicer.com, hit the books tab. I will send you a personalized Father's Day inscription for anyone that you want. If you go to the book tab and then send us that personalization at contact@SeanSpicer.com. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Have a great night.